Julian Vance stared out at the city lights from his penthouse on the 58th floor. Each light represented a connection he couldn't feel. His world was polished glass and silence. The board meeting was a success, a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. But the victory tasted like ash. The betrayal that catapulted him to the top of Vance Industries had hollowed him out, leaving a man who owned everything and felt nothing. He'd built an empire on the ruins of his trust. Restless, he drove aimlessly, the leather of his Aston Martin a cold comfort. He ended up in a part of town he hadn't seen in years, pulling into the lot of a 24-hour diner called the Silver Spoon. The chrome and vinyl promised something uncomplicated, something real. Inside, the air was thick with coffee and fried onions. He took a booth in the corner, a ghost in a bespoke suit. Then, a commotion started. Two rough-looking men were cornering an older biker, a Hell's Angel by his cut, whose face showed more weariness than fight. "Just leave him be," a calm, deep voice said. Julian looked up. A tall black man, built like a fortress but with gentle eyes, stood between the aggressors and the biker. "He's not bothering anyone." "Mind your own business," one of the men snarled, shoving him. The man didn't flinch. He just planted his feet. "I am. This is my business. This is my town. You can finish your meal, or you can leave. Your choice." The raw, quiet integrity of it struck Julian like a physical blow. He watched, frozen, as the man de-escalated a fight that was seconds from exploding, his presence a shield of pure, unshakable decency. The two aggressors, after a moment of sizing up the calm man before them, muttered curses and stomped out of the diner. The biker gave a gruff nod of thanks, paid his bill, and left. The quiet man, Marcus, as Julian heard the waitress call him, returned to his own booth. There, a small girl with wide, curious eyes and two neat braids sat patiently, a sketchbook open before her. She hadn't made a sound through the entire ordeal. Julian found he couldn't leave. He felt an unfamiliar pull. Ordering a coffee he didn't want, he watched them. He saw how Marcus' leg peeking out at Julian. "This is Lily. We should be going." "I'm Julian." He offered a hand, then let it drop when Marcus simply nodded. I come through this area sometimes, for business." It was a lie. "Is the food here always this good?" A small, tired smile touched Marcus's lips. "It's a diner. It's always diner good." He held Lily's small hand. "Come on, sweet pea. Time for bed." As they walked out, Lily turned back and gave Julian a tiny, hesitant wave. He felt something shift inside his chest, a tectonic plate that had been dormant for a decade. He waved back. He knew, with absolute certainty, that he would be back. Julian returned to the Silver Spoon the next night, and the next. On the third night, they were there. He took a deep breath and walked over, his heart pounding with a strange mix of hope and fear. "Diner good again?" Julian asked, trying for a casual tone. Marcus looked up from helping Lily with her macaroni and cheese, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Seems to be our spot." He gestured to the empty side of the booth. "Have a seat, if you want." Julian slid in, feeling as out of place as a hawk in a sparrow's nest. Lily watched him, her fork paused mid-air. She didn't speak, just observed him with an unnerving intensity. "She's quiet," Julian noted gently. Marcus's expression clouded over. He took a slow breath, the way a man does before lifting something heavy. "She has her reasons," he said, his voice low. "Lily. She hasn't spoken a word in 2 years, not since her mom passed." The confession hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Julian was used to conversations as strategic maneuvers. This was different. This was trust. "Her mom, my wife, Sarah, she was in an accident," Marcus continued, his eyes fixed on the chipped Formica tabletop. "Lily was in the car with her. She saw everything. The doctors call it selective mutism, a trauma response. She just shut down. The words are in there. They just can't find their way out yet." He looked at his daughter, his love for her a palpable force in the small booth. "But we're working on it." to take on smaller, local jobs so he could always be there for Lily. One Saturday, after a week of draining negotiations, Julian drove to Marcus's neighborhood. He found the workshop, a converted garage filled with the rich scent of sawdust and wood varnish. Marcus looked up from a chair leg he was sanding, surprise on his face. "Julian, you're a long way from downtown." "I was in the area," Julian lied, feeling the falsehoods pile up. "I wanted to see your work." Marcus wiped his hands on a rag and showed him around. The space was humble but filled with life. Tools hung in organized rows, and pieces of furniture stood like patients in a hospital. Julian's penthouse was a museum of expensive, untouched things. This workshop was a place of healing. In the corner was a large, ornate grandfather clock, its wood split and its face cracked. "What's this?" Julian asked. "Belonged to an old lady down the street. Her husband gave it to her on their first anniversary. Wants it fixed, but I think the mechanism is beyond me." Julian ran a hand over the clock's casing. "My grandfather was a watchmaker," he said, a memory surfacing from a part of his mind he'd long since bricked over. "He taught me a few things." For the next few weekends, the workshop became Julian's sanctuary. Shedding his CEO skin at the door, he'd show up in old jeans. He and Marcus worked on the clock. Julian, with deft fingers, disassembled the intricate brass mechanism. Marcus, with an artist's touch, restored the wooden case, bringing the grain back to life. Lily would sit on a stool, sketching them as they worked. One afternoon, while Julian was focused on a stubborn gear, she tugged on his sleeve. She held up her sketchbook. It was a drawing of 3 people holding hands, a big one, a medium one, and a small one. Over their heads, she had drawn a smiling sun. Julian's breath caught in his throat. It was so simple, yet it felt like the most profound validation he had ever received. Not for a deal closed or a rival crushed, but for simply being there. He looked at Marcus, who was watching them with a soft, knowing smile. The silence in the workshop wasn't empty. It was full of understanding, of a connection being built. First company together. I trusted her with everything. My ideas, my future, my heart. Julian's voice grew tight. The day we were supposed to close our first major funding round, she went to the investors behind my back. She sold them a doctored version of my business plan, cut me out completely, and took the company. She used everything I'd ever told her, every vulnerability, as a weapon. He stared into the darkness. I rebuilt. I built bigger. I made sure I would never, ever be betrayed like that again. I walled myself in with money and power. And it's been lonely inside those walls, Marcus said, his voice gentle. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. Incredibly, Julian admitted, the word a weight lifted from his soul. Just then, a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the neighborhood's dim lighting. A woman in a sharp, expensive suit stepped out. Julian's blood ran cold. It was Amelia. She looked up, her eyes widening as she saw him on the porch of the humble apartment. Her gaze flickered from Julian to the front door, a cruel smile forming on her lips. She had found his weakness. Amelia didn't approach. She gave Julian a look that promised trouble and slid back into her car, leaving the threat lingering. 2 days later, Julian was in a critical meeting, on the verge of acquiring a tech firm that would secure his company's dominance for the next decade. His phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, a photo of Marcus and Lily walking into their apartment. The message below read, "Quaint, let's talk. A." His focus shattered. He excused himself and called the number. Amelia answered on the first ring. "Julian, darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I see you've taken up a new hobby. Philanthropy?" "What do you want, Amelia?" he bit out, pacing his office. "The Sterling Finch acquisition," she said, all pretense gone. "My firm gets a 30% stake, or your new friends might find their lives getting complicated. A single father, a child with pre-existing trauma. A custody review can be so stressful. Social services can be so easily misinformed. The threat was vile, a poisoned dart. Julian tried to act normal during his Tuesday dinner with Marcus and Lily, but the strain was obvious. "You're a million miles away," Marcus observed, his brow furrowed with concern. "Just a tough week at work," Julian lied, the words tasting like acid. He looked at Lily, who was drawing the grandfather clock in her sketchbook, and felt a wave of nausea. Amelia's threat was a cancer, threatening this fragile peace. He knew what the old Julian would do: cut his losses. He would sever ties with Marcus and Lily, telling himself it was for their protection, and retreat behind his walls. It was the logical, safe move of a man who valued his empire above all else. But he wasn't that man anymore. The thought of walking away from them was more terrifying than losing his company. The workshop, the quiet evenings, Lily's hesitant wave. They had rebuilt something inside him. On Thursday night, he sat alone in his penthouse, a contract from Amelia's lawyers on his marble coffee table. It offered him a way out: sign over a portion of the company, and she would disappear. His legacy would be tarnished, but they would be safe. He looked around the vast, empty apartment. It was a monument to a hollow victory. He thought of the warmth of Marcus's workshop, the scent of sawdust, the weight of a little girl's trust. He could have the empire, or he could have a home. The choice, which should have been agonizing, was suddenly, painfully clear. Friday morning. The final signing was scheduled for 10 a.m. The board members were assembled. The CEO of Sterling Finch was there, and so was Amelia, looking triumphant in a blood-red dress, her lawyers flanking her. She had cornered him, and she knew it. Julian walked in at 9:58, his face a calm mask. He didn't look at Amelia. He walked to the head of the table. "Good morning," he said, his voice steady. "Before we proceed, I have an announcement." A nervous silence fell. "For the past 10 years, Julian began, I have run this company with a single-minded focus: to win. I have made decisions based on profit margins and market share. I have sacrificed relationships and cultivated a reputation for being ruthless." He paused. "I have 2 contracts here," Julian said, holding one in each hand. "One represents the biggest victory of my career. The other represents my surrender." He looked at Amelia. "I choose neither." He ripped both sets of contracts in half. The sound echoed in the stunned silence. "This deal is off, and I am resigning as CEO, effective immediately." A decade of ruthless ambition, undone in a single, liberating breath. Pandemonium erupted. Amelia stared, shocked. She had expected him to fight or fold, not to walk away from the table. He had destroyed the game itself. Julian didn't wait for the fallout. He turned and walked out, leaving the wreckage of his empire behind him without a single backward glance. He felt light. The crushing weight of the crown he had fought so hard to wear was finally gone. He drove, not to his empty penthouse, but to Marcus's workshop. He found him putting a final coat of varnish on a rocking chair. Marcus looked up, sensing the shift in Julian before he even spoke. "What's wrong?" Marcus asked, putting his brush down. "Nothing," Julian said, a real, unburdened smile spreading across his face. "Nothing is wrong anymore." He explained everything, the words tumbling out. The history with Amelia, her vile threat, the meeting, his resignation. He laid his entire life bare, holding nothing back. When he finished, breathless and exposed, the workshop was silent, save for the steady, reassuring tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Marcus walked over to him, his expression one of profound empathy. He simply placed a large, warm hand on Julian's shoulder. "What are you going to do now?" "I have no idea," Julian admitted. "I have enough. For the first time in my life, my schedule is completely open." He looked at Marcus, his heart in his eyes. "I was hoping maybe I could help you with that rocking chair, and maybe dinner tonight, at our spot?" Marcus's answering smile was all the confirmation he needed. "I think Lily would like that," he said. "I think we both would." As they left the workshop, Lily ran ahead. She stopped, turned, and looked at Julian. Then, a small, clear voice filled the air. Julian. Tears welled in his eyes as he and I. He smiled back, a smile full of a peace he'd once thought impossible. They had everything they needed. Wealth was not a number in a bank account. It was the richness of a life shared, cultivated with patience and love.